So when it comes to how attracted to you a woman is, a small part of it is your physical appearance, whether or not you're her type. But as a lot of guys find out, that only gets you so far, and it's not what causes a woman to fall in love with you, to chase you, to get obsessed with you. That has to do with how she feels when she's around you, and just as importantly, how she feels when she's away from you, thinking about you. In this video, I'm gonna give you 7 psychological tricks that get a girl obsessed with you. Hi, I'm Bobby Rio, and in this video, I wanna cover things that you can do when you're with a woman that take her interest, take that attraction she has towards you, and turns it into something more. It turns it into that point where she's imagining a future with you, feeling a really strong connection with you, and going home and being almost obsessed with you, because in this day and age, you almost have to have that. If she's not at home thinking about you, it's very hard to keep her attention long enough to make her your girlfriend. You've got to act fast in terms of creating the right type of connection with her, or else another guy's gonna hit her up, she's gonna forget about you, and it's never gonna progress the way you want it to. So in this video, I wanna give you 7 tricks, and we're gonna go through them, and I'm gonna give you examples, and I'm gonna show you how when you're with a woman, these are simple things you can do, but it adds to the level of intensity she feels about you and the attraction she has towards you. So the first thing is called earned validation. So validation is how somebody makes us feel about ourselves. And what happens is a lot of guys try to validate a woman, and they do it too quickly and they do it too commonly. And what they're essentially giving a woman is unearned validation. Unearned validation is when a guy tells a woman how attractive she is or how nice her eyes are. And to a woman who's heard that a million times, it doesn't actually make her feel anything. She's almost numb to that. I can remember experiencing this myself years ago. I went to a third world country. I'm not gonna say the country because I don't wanna call anybody out, but at that particular time in that particular country, just being a American, young, blue-eyed guy had girls coming up to me, telling me how good looking I was. And it was great for a couple days. But by the third day, it was almost like enough, okay? It didn't give me any pride anymore. It felt shallow, and it didn't validate me. It felt almost fake after a point. And that's how most compliments and most attention feels to a woman. It doesn't feel real because she's not actively doing anything to earn it. And for it to be earned, it means so much more to a woman. So what do I mean by earned validation? It means when she's putting in effort and you're approving of that effort. When she's trying to impress you and you're slowly becoming impressed, that's way more validating for a woman because she feels like she's winning you over. And how do you demonstrate that? There's a few ways to do it. One is, I call it the spontaneous compliment. And that's where it doesn't seem planned. It doesn't seem like you have an agenda behind it, or you're trying to, you're trying to win her over and impress her with your compliments. Instead, it's almost like you two are hanging out and she's telling you about her backpacking trip and you're like, wow, you are so friggin' cool. You're adventurous. And you're just talking what's on your mind without a filter. And it seems genuine to her. And that feels earned because it's like you weren't just saying, hey, you're really pretty because you want something out of her or you want to get her to like you. You're saying it feels it's true. And for her, that's validating. That gives her pride because it feels real. Other examples of earned validation is actively listening. This is where most guys, when they're talking to a woman and she starts telling them a story or telling them how she did something, they're already like waiting to ask her questions or to tell her their parallel story that was similar to hers, or they're willing to tell her how cool she is or how whatever. But what you want to do is you want to actually listen, and you want to dig a little bit deeper. You want to sit back and do that head nod, like you're listening. And then when she finishes, you don't want to immediately go, oh, that's really amazing. You want to go, oh, okay, and ask her a deeper question. Oh, so how did that make you feel? Or what was that like? And when you say something like that, she goes back into her head and she comes out and she says something else, and you're listening. And when somebody's really listening, really interested in hearing what we have to say, it's validating. If you've ever had somebody who's listens to you and wants to know more, you know how validating that is and how good it feels to be around that person. Most guys don't actually do that. Most guys, when they're with a woman, they're just waiting for their chance to talk so that they can try to impress her. But the reality is, when she's trying to impress you and you're slowly getting impressed, that's way more pleasurable for her. Another quick way to demonstrate earned validation to a woman is, instead of directly telling her, hey, you're such an amazing girl, or you're so adventurous, you do it in a third person, meaning you can, as you're talking to her, be like, I was telling my friend that story you told me the other day. Because now you're validating her to a third person, which is even more intense. Again, if you've ever been in a situation where somebody talks about how funny you are to somebody else, you know that is pleasurable. We get validated by that. So doing it to a third person is going to be more intense for her than if you simply did it directly to her. So that's earned validation. The next thing that you want to master in terms of obsession triggers and psychological ways to get a woman obsessed is something called 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And this is really a way to build up tension and anticipation, because for a woman, tension and anticipation really are a prerequisite for her to get obsessed, for her to feel the desire to chase a man. Because women, really, that's what it's all about, the build up in their mind. Is it gonna happen? Is it not gonna happen? The little mental game she's playing with herself is way more exciting for her. That's what builds up tension, both in terms of her relationship with you, but also sexual tension. An example of sexual tension is if you're talking to her and you're touching her hand as you talk and you're holding her hand for a second and it feels good for her. And then you pull it away and you don't touch her for a little bit, because now in her mind she's waiting for that touch again. Whereas if you just grabbed her hand and you sat there the entire conversation holding her hand, eventually the tension dissipates. So you always want to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. This goes for things like holding eye contact with her, where you're talking, you're having this flirty conversation with her, and then you have that slow moment where you're looking at her and you hold that eye contact, and then you step back and you go back to the normal conversation. Always 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. You can also do this in how you progress the relationship forward, where if things are, generally a relationship moves at a certain speed. You hang out, the texting slowly increases. What you want to do is you increase and then you pull back a little bit, because now she's waiting. If you increase it, then she gets used to it, and now you're texting her 2-3 times a day, and now that just becomes common. You want to get to that point and then pull back a little bit, make her want it again. That's what women actually like. It's the buildup. It's the what's going on here. We talk about it in a lot of my other videos. It's that mental game, that romantic tension that she needs to feel. And a way to think about it, a simple trick in your mind to remember this, is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Whether it's building sexual tension, like I said, through the touching, or whether it's progressing a relationship through, let's just say, 2 weekends in a row you've hung out with her, right? That's 2 steps forward. The next weekend, make plans with your friends and don't hang out with her. Take a step back. That keeps her interested and engaged. The next thing that we're gonna discuss in terms of triggers is something I call cool vulnerability. This is something you may have heard me speak about before, but what it really is, it's a way to be open with a woman, to reveal things about yourself, to humanize yourself, but also do it in an amusing, attractive way. And I always say the best example of this, the best thing that you can do if you want to learn how to be coolly vulnerable, is watch interviews with celebrities. Because a celebrity obviously has a publicist that he's paying millions of dollars a year, or 100, whatever it is, to come up with this sort of stuff for them. Because their entire job when they're being interviewed is to make an audience obsessed with them, to make an audience fall in love with you. When Matthew McConaughey is being interviewed, or George Clooney is being interviewed, or Justin Bieber is being interviewed on whatever talk show it is, they want the audience to fall in love with them, because that means that's their job. That's why they're on that show, to get the people to go, I really like him, I want to go see his movie. So what they do is they've learned that if Matthew McConaughey gets on stage and he starts trying to impress you and talking about how he's got this giant mansion and this yacht and this sexy model girlfriend, we're not really gonna like him. So instead he gets on and he tells these humorous anecdotes about his life that make him seem like a real person. That's what you need to get in with women, because there's gotta be some level of openness, but you gotta do it in a way that's amusing. So an example that I'm thinking of is, I remember talking to a girl and we were talking about movies, and she had told me she cried at the end of Titanic, and I was like, oh no, yeah. I was like, the only movie I ever cried at, and it was the worst experience, because is back in college and I'm there with 8 of my guy friends watching Armageddon, and then there's like the ending scene where Bruce Willis pushes Ben Affleck out and he sacrifices himself. And I'm there with all my friends and I start bawling and I'm trying to hide it, and all my friends are like looking over. And so that's an example of cool vulnerability. Vulnerability is not real vulnerability where you're telling a woman that your dad didn't love you enough when you were a kid. That's not stuff to do early on. Cool vulnerability is the slightly embarrassing admissions that you make that she can identify with, that shows her that you're opening up around her a little bit. Again, if you want to learn this, you can watch late night talk shows or just any sort of interview with a celebrity, because they're pounding you with this. You will not watch an interview with a celebrity where they're not using this idea of cool vulnerability, which shows you that it's powerful, because celebrities aren't going on these talk shows and just winging it. They've got scripted stuff that people are being paid a lot of money to give them, because they know that's what works to get an audience obsessed with them. So the next thing that we want to do, and we just mentioned the word audience, is be a good audience. This is a sort of simple one, and I alluded to this when I was talking about the idea of earned validation. And that's this idea that most guys, when they're talking to a woman, they're so in their own head thinking about what they want to say next and how they can impress her. But really, we enjoy being around somebody who's a good audience. Think about humor, for instance. And most people think, oh, I want to hang out with the funny person. But the reality is most people, most guys, right, if you're a standard guy, you want to hang out with the people who think you're funny. You want to hang out with somebody that when you're on a roll, they're laughing at your humor, and they're finding everything you're saying funny, and they're waiting for you to say the next thing because it's going to be funny. And that actually feels good. That's like the person we get addicted to being around. It's not the person who's making us laugh the whole time. Sure, we like that person, but we also want to be the star. We don't want to be the supporting character. We want to be the star a little bit. So you want to give her a chance to be the star. So if she's telling you a story, don't sit there stoically waiting for your turn to tell her a better story. Be a good audience. Have that smile like growing as she's telling the story, where you're talking through a smile to her and you're on that same page where you're both vibing and you're feeling the energy. If she switches and she's telling you now a serious story, you relax a little bit, you listen. You're a good audience. We like being around somebody who's a good audience, and not enough guys do that because they are too much in their own head worrying about the story they're gonna tell, the joke they're gonna make, that they don't actually listen and be receptive to what she's saying, what she's trying to communicate. So the next technique is called partners in crime. And if you've ever watched the show The Office, and especially in the beginning seasons when Jim and Pam, if you know the characters, when they weren't together, this is like a prime example of partners in crime. It's when you and her have these inside jokes and you do things that make each other laugh that other people aren't aware of. Thinking of an example, I remember a time where there was this girl that I was hanging out with, and she hated when somebody would say literally. So anytime somebody was like, literally, it just made her cringe. So I would do a couple things. Sometimes if somebody was talking and they used the word literally, I would give her a look like, and she'd see and have to not laugh. Or sometimes if I was talking to somebody who had just said it, I would start overly using the word literally to make her laugh. And it was our inside joke. Other inside jokes or ways to create this partners in crime sort of element is coming up with a mission or getting her to do something that's slightly outside her comfort zone with you. So an example would be, let's just say you're driving home from hanging out with her, you guys are in the car, and you drive past this really big mansion, and there's an open house there, and that you can go in, and you say, hey, let's go inside and pretend we're this rich French couple and whatever. And you go in and you guys put on this like act to the realtor, pretending that you're gonna buy the house and asking these questions. And this is just a fun thing you do with her, that when she leaves you, she has that memory, that thing that only you and her experience together. And these are things she needs to get past just that attraction. Because attraction, like I said, physical attraction, she's gonna meet a guy who's better looking than you. It's just inevitable. She's gonna meet a guy who's funnier than you. But all these different elements, if you combine them, it's really hard for another guy to come along and give her all of this. One guy can give her some of it, but it's very hard to give her all of it. So the more of the stuff you're doing, the more likely she is to get obsessed with you, to chase you, to fall in love with you. The next one is just a simple one, and it's revealing intimate things. This is something that you want to do with her, and that's really where anytime somebody reveals something to somebody else, they feel a bond with them. So it could be something like, an example might be you're talking to her and you go, hey, you ever, when you're feeling down, you go on Facebook and you look for like your old classmates who are doing worse than you, or you look to see who your ex is dating and then you judge them and you're like, oh, okay, I'm better looking than that guy, or I'm more successful, or you say to her, or you go, I'm hotter than that girl. That's something that it's like things that you don't admit to the average person, but everybody feels it or has done it, and you get her to say these things to you and admit these things to you. It increases the connection she feels towards you, and it makes it harder for her to walk away from you because things about her. She's admitted things to you, so that interest level intensifies. The final thing that we're going to talk about is something called dissonance. And this is really powerful, and this is the only one on this list that can be applied wrong, in the sense that it could be a manipulative tactic. And we don't want to do that. In fact, my technique, the scrambler, is largely based on this idea of dissonance, but what we show you how to do is how to do it in an ethical manner, because dissonance essentially is when there's two conflicting ideas going through our mind. And if you've ever been obsessed with a woman, I can almost bet, having done coaching calls with guys now for 15 years, that the obsession stems from dissonance. Dissonance means that a woman is giving you some signals that she likes you, but then other signals that she doesn't like you. That's dissonance. She's talking about a future and making comments about how she's gonna bring you to her sister's wedding in 6 months, but then she keeps canceling plans with you. Two conflicting ideas drive us crazy because the human brain needs completion. We need to know the answer. Mysteries and incompleteness, they drive us crazy. So anytime there's two conflicting ideas going on, it's going to increase our investment in the other person. Like I said, what we do, and if you haven't watched it, I have a video below called The Scrambler, and we talk about this idea of dissonance, but we also talk about incorporating earned validation into it. Incorporating things like 2 steps forward, 1 step back into it. Because when you do all of these things with a woman in a specific order, because if you came out and you just did dissonance, and you just had her wondering what's going on because there's two conflicting things going through her mind, there's no real investment yet in you for her to actually care. And a lot of guys make this mistake, is they hear something like, oh, you got to play hard to get. Oh, but Bobby is just telling me to play hard to get. But I always say, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, did it make a sound? Well, it's very similar when most guys play hard to get, because if she's not paying attention to you, if she's not invested in you, and you start playing hard to get, she doesn't even notice. Hard to get works when you have her invested in you, when you have her thinking about you, when you've done these other things, and then you take the step back. Then you introduce this dissonance in her mind. That's when you ignite that strong desire. That's when you have that girl who's blowing up your phone and chasing you, and she's the one initiating plans, and she's the one, like I said, talking about a future with you, except unlike the girl who talks about a future with you but then never wants to meet up, she's always available to hang out. A lot of guys think it's hard to move a girl from dating to a relationship, because if you're not doing the things that we talk about here, it is hard, because she does have a lot of options. But the fact is, women get into relationships every single day. And if you go on, I mentioned Facebook earlier, and one of the things that is really interesting to do, and it validates a lot of my arguments to guys, because a lot of guys will say, women only want the rich guys, or women only want the really attractive guys. And I say, I don't know if that's true, because when I go on Facebook and I look at the hottest girls that I went to college with, or the girls that I was bartending and hanging out with after college, or girls that 10 years ago, whatever, and you see the guys that they've married, it's never a super good looking guy. Sometimes, but very rarely is it some guy that you're like, oh, like that guy, of course he got her. No, it's generally an average looking guy. And although you never can tell somebody's money level you can judge, like, all right, like she's not living in a super expensive area. So she didn't marry a super rich guy. So what was it about that guy? How did she leave the dating pool for that guy? It's these things here. He's doing all these things. And that's why she's willing to go, I'm gonna get off Tinder and I'm gonna get into a relationship with this guy. So again, if you haven't watched my Scrambler video, I'll put a link to that below, because I talk about the step-by-step way to do this so that you don't do it wrong and you don't play hard to get for a woman who's not even paying attention to you. If you like this video, hit subscribe, leave me a comment, and let me know what you want me to cover in my next video.